Okay. Now, in the first two videos, we got some familiarity with the SPSS dashboard, that how this SPSS looks like. For example, we talked about the data view and the variable view, that it has two windows, and you can shift these windows by just clicking the data view and the variable view. This is what we talked about in the first video. And then in the second video, we talked about the structure of the questionnaire. Now, in this video, what we are going to do is that we are going to code our questionnaire into the SPSS. This is the very first step of data entry into SPSS. So, as I've already told you in the last video, that you need to understand your questionnaire first, and then you will be able to code your data into SPSS. Now, as we talked about that there are two parts. So starting from this first part, which is a demographic question part, we have three questions. And then in the second part, we have number of questions for each variables, and there are total three variables. And this is the model that we're using to do our research, which we'll talk about later when we'll be going for our hypothesis testing and other analysis. Now, starting from this questionnaire, the first part, how we are going to code it into SPSS. So now, shift to this SPSS window. And as we talked about that there are two windows, variable view and data view, the thing that you need to remember here is that you first need to go to the variable view. In the variable view, we will have to code the questions that we've asked in the questionnaire, or you can say the coding of the variables is done in the variable view. And then data which we will get from the respondents will be recorded in the data view. So, because suppose we haven't sent this paper to the respondents, or we've just started collecting data from some of the respondents and we need to put it in the SPSS, the first thing that we need to do is we will have to code our data into variable view. Now, just looking at the first part of the questionnaire, which is the demographic part, and in the demographic part, the first question is about the gender. Now, let's shift to this window and see when we go to our variable view, the first thing that we see is the name. Then there is a type, width, decimal, label, values, missing, and many other things. But the most important things here for now are the name, maybe the labels, and the values. So what we are going to do is we are going to type the first question, which is here, is the gender. So gender. We are going to write our first question into this first variable view name. And now see, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to give a space after gender, and suppose I want to write that gender of the space respondents. The moment I do it, it gives me this error that variable name contains an illegal character. Now, I did it deliberately just to tell you that if you try and give spaces and some other characters, it might not take that name. So what we can do here is that we can just type the word gender here. And if you want to type something which is in more detail and you want to give spaces, you can use this label part. Now, see, the moment I only have written gender without any space, it's not giving any error. So if I have to write something in the form of a sentence, for example, so what I'll do is I'll write in the label part. But suppose if you say that you need to give spaces and your variable name is at least a 3 or a 2 word variable name. So what you can do is after the gender, for example, we can give an underscore and then we can write off and then underscore. So instead of using the spaces, you can use the underscore, and now it's not going to give you any error. So, but we'll prefer that we write a very short name in the name part. The next part, which is very important here, is the value part. Now, what do we do in value part? Value part is the portion in which we are going to code our question. Now, the moment I go to this value tab in front of this gender, it gives me this blue button. Now, if I click this blue button, it takes me to another window. I'll do it again for you. I was here. Normally, it doesn't show up. But the moment you're going to click this values window, it is going to give you this option of blue button. The moment you're going to click this blue button, it gives you another window in which it says that you can value labels. And then there are this value, label, and another big box. Now, what is this? This is actually the response part, the options that you've given to your respondents. For example, for the gender question, we had given two options, male and female. And if you just recall that in the questionnaire part, we talked about this coding part, that usually we give numbering to these options. Like for example, for male, we'll give 1, and for female, we'll give 2. So what we are going to do is that we are going to put values part here, which means 1. And then in the label part, you can write male. Now, what we've done is that we've given gender's first option a code, that male is for 1 or 1 is for male. And because male was our first option, that is why we are giving it 1. You can always give it a 0 or 1. For example, 0 to male and 1 to female. You can also give 1 and 2, for example, 1 for male and 2 for female. So that doesn't make much of a difference as long as you remember that what coding have you given to what option. So the safe way is to go from 1 onwards. So I've just given 1 male, and the next thing I need to do is to add. Now, in this question, I had 2 options. So the second option is value as 2, and the label part will contain female and add. Because in the gender part, I only had 2 options. So this is fine. I've given 1 to male, 2 to female, and these are the 2 options. So I'll just click OK. And the other things are not very important right now. So you just need to understand that there is a gender. This is the name of the first question that we've asked. And in the values, I can go back to this value. And for example, if you've done any mistake here, you can just click it and you can remove it. Or you can just change it, and it's going to take a few seconds. So, okay. Now, in the second part, for example, I have this question which is known as experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put experience here. And now, as we talked about that, if you want to go for a full name or a full statement, for example, you need to use this label part. Now the label part will allow you any sort of characters. So it's not going to give you any problem. Now, once we've done this label part, the next thing is to give values. So what we are going to do is, in the value part, if you just remember what we did in the gender question, again, we're going to do the same thing. For example, here there's a blue button, we are going to click it. And how many options do we have now? 4 options. So I'm going to give this less than 1 year as option 1 or label 1 or value 1, and 1 is equal to less than 1 year. So I'm going to copy it from here, paste it here and add. Next thing is the same 2, and 2 is for 1 to 5 years, and add. 3 is 6 to 10 years and add, and 4 is equal to 11 years or above and add. So as we only had these 4 options in this category, so we are going to click OK. Now the values have been saved. Now the last question, for example, I'm going to ask this as education, and then in the education part we have how many options? 1 for intermediate, just going to copy and paste from here. So 1 is for intermediate, 2 is for bachelor's. You can have your own options. For example, if you want to write here number of years of education, for example 12 years of education, 16 years of education, or whatever. So what you can do is you can simply copy and paste from here, give it a label 3, add, and then MPhil and PhD is going to go to the label, and obviously we're going to give it value 4. So as we only had these 4 values, we can go for this OK, and it is done. So we are done with our first part of the questionnaire. And now the second part. The second part, for example, if we have this formalization. Now the good thing about SPSS is that it can take all sorts of data, but it should be in numbers. So what we're going to do is that, for example, here we have asked the first question about, or first statement about formalization, and the options are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, instead of writing the whole statement here, whole statement in the name part, what we are going to do is we are going to give it an abbreviation. For example, formalization, if we can just give it an F1. Now, what do we mean by F1? The first statement of formalization. So I've given it a short name of F1. The same way I can go for F2. The same way I can go for F3, F4, and F5, F6, and F7. Now, what do we have to do next? We need to go to this value box. So click the yellow button. 1 is for strongly disagree. I'm just giving it a short name. You can always give a full name. Add. 2 is for disagree. 3 is for neutral. 4 is for agree. And 5 is for strongly agree. You can write the full name but just to save your time, I'm just writing the short words. And okay, as we only had these 5 options here in the first statement, so okay. Now, you can do this individually for all of your items, or what you can do is you can simply go to this value of F1, right click, copy, and then select the rest of them because they have the same value, and simply control V, or what you can do is you can simply right click and paste. It's giving some issues, but definitely is going to copy and paste. So let's try it once again. Copy from here and then paste. Now this time it worked. So it'll save you a lot of time. If you have the same value, for example, when you're using a 5-point Likert scale for all of your items, so what you can do is you can just copy and paste. Now look at all of these value boxes and they contain the same values. So this is one advantage that SPSS can give you. So the same way, if we move to our next variable, for example, employee creativity, and in this we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 11 items. So what we can do is employee creativity. We can give it a name of EC1, EC2, EC3, EC4, EC5, EC6. Unfortunately, we do not have many options in SPSS like we have in Excel. Maybe in some advanced versions, we are going to have these options. We cannot just write first few and then we can just drag it down to make it a serial of these things. We don't have those options. So EC7, EC8, EC9, EC10, and EC11. Because we only have 11 options here, the same can be done with these value boxes. You can simply paste them and it will take all of the values the same way. It's giving us some error, but you can always do it. So we are done with these 2 variables. Now, what if we have a third variable, which is known as innovation? So what you can do is you can go for maybe IN1, which means innovation 1. So this way, you can always go for IN2, for example, IN3. Now, I've deliberately made this mistake. For example, if you're unable to delete this, for example, if you want to edit it, you just have to double click it. But what if we want to delete the whole thing? If I press this and try and delete it, now I'm pressing the delete button. It's not giving me any delete options. So if you have to delete this thing, you cannot just delete it by clicking the delete. You have to right click here and then clear it. So this is how we actually make our variable view, and this is how we code our questionnaire into SPSS. Now, the last part, we just want to see what happened in the data view. So if we just move to our data view, now you see we have this gender, experience, education, F1, F2, and the rest of the variables or the rest of the items that we punched into our variable view. So this is how you actually convert your questionnaire into your SPSS. In the next video, we'll be talking about how to fill the data part. For example, you've made this one. Now, what if you have the respondents' responses with you, and how do you put your actual data in the data view? So please try and understand that first we need to do this variable view part, and then only we can go to our data view part. Because if we just start writing our data into data view, it's not going to make any sense. So the first part, when you're moving to data entry into SPSS, the first part is to fill your variable view and do the coding of the questionnaire. In the next video, we'll be talking about how to enter data in data view. Thank you very much.